So I've been getting a lot of questions about the exclusive right to sell listing agreement and conditional versus unconditional termination and withdrawals. And what does that mean? Because we're getting requests from sellers to be able to cancel the agreement. First of all, let's start by saying this is a contract. This is a marketing agreement between our brokerage and the seller. And it's a professional contract. It's no difference than when you go and you sign up for a professional service from somebody, you go to an attorney, whatever it may be, you are signing a contractual agreement to have your home marketed. And the sellers need to understand what that means if they decide to cancel or withdraw. So let's First of all, let's talk about section one. The termination date. It ends at 11:59 because again, time, all things are calendar days, not time stamps. So it ends at 11:59. That's the termination date. That is the date that section 4 of this leasing agreement stops for you, which is the marketing. So that's your end date. We will no longer continue to market the property for sale on that date. However, there is a protection period for us as a brokerage so that any marketing efforts we did during the listing agreement time for a certain number of days, which is what you will put in, and I'm going to recommend the time frame, which is 180 days. If that property sells, leases, transfers, or anything based upon anyone that we procured during that time period, we are due a full commission. So we'll talk about that. Also, another very important point to bring up really quick. Starts on section or line 6. Upon full execution of a contract for sale and purchase of the property, all rights and obligations of this agreement will automatically extend through the date of the actual closing of the sales contract. What does that mean? You don't need to get a modification of listing agreement if you have a signed contract and you're about to terminate. The listing agreement automatically extends through that. So keep that in mind. Now, my suggestion is to get one done, but you don't have to. Also, line 8, I stress this all the time. Seller and broker acknowledge that this agreement does not guarantee a sale. Very important to talk about that with your customers. This is your efforts. This is all you are obligated to do is to make diligent and continued efforts to sell the property in accordance with this agreement until a sales contract is pending on the property. What does diligent mean? Diligent means that you are continually making those efforts, right? Timely manners. You need to be communicating with your customers weekly, sometimes daily, whatever you're doing, and showing them that you are making continued efforts to sell the property. We talk about EDOM, EDOMM. Every day on market matters. This is where this comes from, section 4 of the listing agreement. You need to be doing something every single day to be marketing the property. That's your obligation. That's what it says right here. So make sure you're doing that. Section 8, this is our compensation. We get paid under 2 circumstances. 2, that's it. Let's talk about that. The first one is if during this contractual agreement, we procure a buyer. And how do we procure a buyer? That could be somebody that comes to an open house. It could be our own buyer. It could be our marketing efforts where another buyer's agent is bringing a buyer. That is procuring efforts. It could be that they see it on Zillow or realtor.com or whatever it may be. We're bringing a buyer who's ready, willing, and able to purchase the property at the terms of this agreement. That means the price we agree with and any closing cost assistance or things like that, as well as the types of financing that we will offer. So that's why it's very important to get all those terms laid out in the listing agreement, because if you have a buyer who comes and then the seller says, I really don't want to take that offer, I want to wait and hold something higher, guess what? You are due your commission already. The second way we are due our commission is if a seller goes into an agreement with a buyer under any terms. So once a seller and buyer execute a contract, if that seller chooses to cancel that contract at any point in time, you are due your commissions. Can we get them? We'll have to probably sue to get them, but you are technically due your commission at that point in time. Okay. And this is any term. So it's very important to understand what that means, because that's when is our fees due, because this ties into the release and cancellation. So 8D, broker's fee is due in the following circumstances. There's 3 times it's due. If any interest in the property is transferred, whether by sale, lease, exchange, governmental action, bankruptcy, or any other means of transfer, whether the buyer is secured by us, the broker, or any other person. So if they decide to lease the property instead of selling it, you're due your commission. If it forecloses, you're due your commission. If they go into bankruptcy, you're due your commission. If they transfer it to a sibling or another spouse or somebody else, you're due your commission. Always remember that. Second reason that it's due. If the seller refuses to sign an offer at the price and terms stated in this agreement, if they default on an executed sales contract, or even agrees with the buyer to cancel an executed sales contract. So technically, once you're under contract one time, you are due your fee. So if you have a really difficult seller, we can use that to our advantage. So remember that, understand that. If they refuse to sign an offer, if they default in an executed contract, or if they agree with the buyer to cancel an executed contract, you need to explain this to your sellers because this is how we get paid, everybody. We're doing our job, we expect to get paid. The third reason, and this is what we're talking about with the protection period, if within, and I like to have 180 days, actually, San Peak is going to have 180 days after the termination period. If the seller transfers or contracts to transfer the property or, or any interest in the property, very important. If they transfer it or if they go under contract, and even if they don't transfer it, it's still due. Very important. To any prospects with whom seller broker or any real estate licensee communicated regarding the property before termination date. Now, how would we know this? Well, reverse prospecting is very important. We got to make sure of that. The emails that you send out, very important for that. So if you send an e-blast, who did you send it to? Because if that buyer's agent brings a buyer or you communicate to a buyer, we need to be able to protect ourselves. This is why holding on to your communications is very important. So if they do that before the termination date, then the fee is due us within any days after that. So if it's 180 days, so if it terminates today, we have a 180-day protection period. Okay. Now, if they go under agreement with another agent to relist the property, that goes away, just so everybody understands. So if they relist with another agent, you've lost it. Even if it's an agent that you were talking to or someone that viewed the property while you were in your listing agreement, once it goes into a new listing agreement, everything's off the table. Conditional termination now. So now we've talked about these terms, we understand what they are, we understand a protection period, we understand when our fees are due, but let's talk about what a seller wants to terminate the contract. There's two differences. There's a withdrawal and a termination. A withdrawal means they just want to take it off the market for a little while. We can do that. You would use a modification of listing agreement and you would simply take the property and put it into a temporarily off the market status in the MLS. Okay. Let's say they've got a graduation going on, or they've just had a death, or they are having a new baby and they need a couple of weeks. They don't want to show the property. You would simply just withdraw the property in the MLS, but we are still under our listing agreement and you can continue to market the property. We're just withdrawing it from the MLS. Okay. Now, let's say you get a seller who wants to terminate. First thing I'm going to tell you is you should really never get to that point. If you are getting a seller who really wants to terminate, there's probably some miscommunication that happened at the beginning. You didn't either explain the listing agreement well enough, or you're not communicating that diligent and continued efforts to them about marketing their property. So if you got to that point, now they want to terminate. There's two ways to terminate. There's a conditional termination and an unconditional termination. So the conditional termination is what the contract states clearly in section 11. Explain this to your sellers. First of all, there are three things that need to happen in order for a conditional termination to take place. The first one is that the seller has to sign a withdrawal agreement. Okay. We use the modification of the listing agreement and we just say that it ends on this day. Okay. Perfect. The second thing is that the sellers will reimburse us, the brokerage, for all direct expenses incurred in the marketing of the property. That's your sign, that's your post, that's your photos, that's any flyers you did, that's anything you bought for an open house, that's your open house lines, that's any e-blast you do, that's anything that you spend money on, postcards, whatever it may be. You need to very clearly start from now on documenting every single time you have a listing the cost. Now, you may use the same for sale sign over and over again, but if that for sale sign costs you $50, you're going to put $50 for that property and your post install. And you're going to keep this fee, this list, because they are due that to you if you decide to conditionally terminate. They will also have to pay a cancellation fee. So let's talk about that. I think going forward, the cancellation fee for Sand Peak Realty needs to be at least 1% of the purchase price. They got to have some skin in the game, folks. If you aren't comfortable enough to request that, if they cancel your services, then we need to get you into the office and work with the brokerage team to help you come up with a better script, do some role playing, and have more confidence. Because again, you are spending your time, your effort, your money, you're away from your family, you're away from doing other things that you want to do. You're educating yourself, you're learning, you're practicing, you're working on marketing. All these things cost time and money. We need to have our sellers hold to that agreement. So again, the cancellation fee should probably be out 1%. Now you can round it. So let's say it's a $300,000 house. If you wanna make it $3,000, that's fine. If you wanna make it $4,000, $5,000, whatever you wanna be. Put some skin in the game, folks, though, okay? Now, very clearly, we can void the conditional termination and seller will pay the fee started stated in paragraph 8A. So if they don't want to do a conditional termination, they want to do an unconditional termination, then you are due the entire fee as listed in section 8A. That's the entire commission. So you need to explain that. Big difference. Now, if they want to conditionally terminate, that means that we are protected. Okay. So if seller transfers or contracts the transfer of the property, any interest of the property during the time period for the data conditional termination date and protection period, if applicable. This means that if they transfer the property within the protection period, then you are due the full commission. Very clear. Make sure you articulate that. If they're like, "Hey, I just want out of this agreement. I don't want to use you. I don't even want a conditional termination." Fine, then we're owed the full fee. I am not going to release people anymore. We are going to be holding our sellers accountable to these listing agreements because it very clearly states the time. So again, conditional termination, read section 11. Three things: sign the agreement, pay for direct expenses incurred for the marketing, and pay a cancellation fee. If at any time in the protection period you sell, you lease, you transfer, you go bankrupt, whatever it may be, we're due our full commission minus that cancellation fee. Very important, minus that cancellation fee. However, if they don't and they want to just get out of the agreement, perfect. We can get you out of the agreement, but we're due our full fee. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. My suggestion is that you get back in this form and have a good look through it. But I hope that helps. If you have questions, let me know. And we're going to take some time this summer to keep going through these contracts. Take care, everyone.